Oh, hey! How are you? It's been a few days, huh? Okay, so today we're going to go over Genesis 12, which is basically Abraham's journey. And I'm going to, read the commentaries as usual. There is going to be a little bit of extra reading out of at least one of the commentaries than the other. But it's good to know as much as possible when you're reading, right? So, hoping this doesn't take more than an hour, but if you have an hour of your time, I would suggest probably at least setting aside an hour just so you can spend your time in this. Okay. Genesis 12. Oh, and I'm back to using my original, the NASB. Okay. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from your country, and from your relatives, and from your father's house, to the land which I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and make your name great. And so you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the ones who curse you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed." So Abram went forth as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. Now Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his nephew, and all their possessions which they had accumulated, and the persons which they had acquired in Haran. And they set out for the land of Canaan. Thus they came to the land of Canaan. Abram passed through the land as far as the site of Shechem to the oak of Morah. Now the Canaanite was then in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your descendants I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. Then he proceeded from there to the mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. Abram journeyed on, continuing towards the Negev. Verse 10. Now there is a famine in the land. So Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. It came about when he came near to Egypt that he said to Sarai his wife, "See now, I know that you are a beautiful woman. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife,' and they will kill me, but they will let you live. Please say that you are my sister, so that it may go well with me because of you, and that I may live on account of you." It came about when Abram came into Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. Pharaoh's officials saw her and praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. Therefore he treated Abram well for her sake, and gave him sheep and oxen and donkeys, and male and female servants, and female donkeys and camels. But the Lord struck Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And then Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go." Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they escorted him away with his wife and all that belonged to him. Okay, now I'm going to read the commentary out of this real quick, just so you can hear what MacArthur has to say on this subject. Okay. Chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. The Lord to Abram. This passage is the promise whose fulfillment extends all through Scripture, either in fact or in exception to Revelations 20. The actual Abrahamic covenant is introduced in chapter 12, 1 through 3. Actually made in chapter 15, 18 through 21, reaffirmed in chapter 17, verses 1 through 21, then renewed also with Isaac, chapter 26, verses 2 through 5, and Jacob, chapter 28, 10 through 17. It is an everlasting covenant. Chapter 17, 7 through 8, first, I'm guessing Chronicles 16, 17, and Psalms 105, 7 through 12, and Isaiah 24, 5, which contains four elements. 1, seed, where it refers to Christ. 2, land, a nation, divine blessing and protection. Plus divine blessing and protection. This covenant is unconditional in the sense of its ultimate fulfillment of a kingdom and salvation for Israel. You'd also see information on Romans 11, verses 1 through 27. But conditional in terms of immediate fulfillment, its national importance to Israel is magnified by its repeated references and point of appeal throughout the Old Testament. Its importance spiritually to all believers is expounded by Paul. Okay, so now we're going to go into more of a verse by verse. 12:1. To the land. Abram was still in Haran when the call was repeated to go to Canaan. 12:2, named Great. Abram's magnificent reputation and legacy was fulfilled materially, spiritually, and socially. 12:3, the one who curses you, I will curse. Those who curse Abram and his descendants are those who treat him lightly, despise him, or treat him with contempt, God's curse for such lack of respect and disdain was to involve the most harsh of divine judgments. The opposite was to be true to those who bless him and his people. In you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Paul identified these words as the gospel beforehand to Abraham in Galatians chapter 3, verse 8. Chapter 12:4, Haran. They must have been there for some time because they accumulated a group of people, probably servants. That's more than likely possible, because he didn't have children at this point. 12:5, they came to Canaan. 12:6, Shechem, a Canaanite town located in the valley between Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. West of the Jordan, about 15 miles, and north of Jerusalem, about 30 miles. Moreh was most likely a resident of the area for whom the tree was named. Canaanite was then in the land. Moses was writing approximately 700 years after Abram entered the land, 1405 BC. The Canaanites of whom he wrote were soon to be the opponents of Israel as they entered Canaan. 12:7. I will give this land. God was dealing with Abram, not in a private promise, but with a view towards high and sacred interest, long into the future, i.e., the land which his posterity was to inhabit as a peculiar people. The seeds of divine truth were to be sown there for the benefit of all mankind. It was chosen as the most appropriate land for the coming of divine revelation and salvation for the world. Altar to the Lord. By this act, Abram made an open confession of his religion, established worship of the true God, and declared his faith in God's promise. This was the first true place of worship ever erected in the promised land. Isaac would later build an altar also to commemorate the Lord's appearance to him in chapter 26, verses 24 and 25. And Jacob also built one in Shechem, chapter 33, verses 18 through 20. Now, chapter 12, verse 8, Bethel, Ai. Bethel, 7 miles north of Jerusalem, was named later by Abraham, chapter 28, verse 19. Ai was 2 miles east of Bethel, where Joshua later fought. Joshua 7, 8. Okay. Chapter 12, verse 9. Toward the Negev. Abram moved toward the Negev into the less desirable area for raising crops, but better for his vocation as a herdsman, perhaps engaging also in merchant activity. Chapter 12, verse 10, a famine in the land. Famine was not an unusual phenomenon in Canaan. 2 other major food shortages also occurred during this is going to be hard. patriarchal patriarchal period. Chapter 26, verse 1, chapter 41, verse 56. The severity and timing of this one forced Abram, soon after his arrival and travel in the Promised Land, verses 5 through 9, to emigrate to Egypt, where food was usually in abundant supply. Still holding to God's promise, he did not return to Ur, though matters were extremely difficult. Hebrews 11:15 will bring you into that. Chapter 12, verse 11, beautiful woman. At 65, Sarah was still young and exceptionally attractive, being only half the age she was to be when she died, 127. The patriarchs lived long. Abram was 175 when he died. Chapter 12 and 13. Abram's fear of Sarah being taken to Pharaoh's harem and his being killed led him to disguise his true relationship to her. Abram sought on his own initiative to take care of his future, thinking to assist God in fulfilling his promises. Chapter 12, verse 13. Sister. This was a lying half-truth, since Sarai was Abram's half-sister. Chapter 12, verse 15. Taken into Pharaoh's house. Egyptian officials did take notice of Sarai and informed their monarch of her beauty. The result was not unexpected. She ended up in Pharaoh's harem. Chapter 12, verse 17. The Lord struck Pharaoh with great plagues. The separation of Abram and Sarai was critical enough to invoke the Lord's personal and dramatic intervention. Abram engineered the ruse to protect himself, verse 13, that I may live. Apparently without too much thought being given to Sarai, but God's reaction focused upon the protection of Sarai because of Sarai. Chapter 12, verse 18 and 19. What is this you have done to me? Take her and go. Somehow, and it remains unexplained, the plagues uncovered the deceit of Abram for Pharaoh. The monarch of Egypt humiliated Abram with his questions, showing more character than Abram gave him credit for, and sending Abram out of his country. Chapter 12, verse 20, escorting him away. Abram's lie brought him and his extended family to an exit from Egypt, one which the servants must have talked about amongst themselves, with some loss at Abram's integrity and reputation in their eyes. Okay, so that's strictly from my Bible. Now I'm going to read from this one. Okay. Genesis 12, 1 through 14:24. So I'm only going to read partial of this. Okay? Genesis 12 is one of the most important passages in the entire Bible. It introduces the promises that are central to the covenant that God would make with Abram that would have implications for the remainder of Genesis. Even though they would not be completely revealed until they were ultimately fulfilled in Christ, God's blessing that began in the garden and later witnessed by Noah would be forever revealed through Abram and his seed. Abram was from Ur, a region in southern Mesopotamia. God directed him to leave his land, relatives, and father's house to follow the Lord's leading. He made several promises to Abram, to give Abram land which would be the land of Canaan, to make Abram into a great nation, to bless Abram, to make him a man of renown, doing for Abram what the people in the plains of Shire wanted to do for themselves. There we go. To bless those who blessed him and to curse those who mistreated him. God's purpose for blessing Abram was not only for Abraham. He chose Abram. Was not only for Abram. Who becomes Abraham. He chose Abram ultimately to be a blessing to people from every nation, which is communicated twice for emphasis. As Moses delivered his account to Israel, it was important for the people of Israel to realize that their heritage began with God's purposes and promises to their forefather Abram. It was for this reason when God called Moses to go to Egypt to deliver the people out of bondage that Moses was to tell them that the God of Abram sent him. Furthermore, just like with Abram, God expected their faithful obedience to his calling. Okay. The Lord's call to Abram to leave his country, kindred, and father's house sounds like Jesus' words to forsake everything else and follow me. Paul indicated that the gospel was first told to Abram, so this should be no surprise. Galatians 3:8. According to Acts 7, chapter 7, verse 2 through 4, God initially spoke to Abram in Ur. After that, he and his family moved to Haran in Aram, and it was while Abram was in Haran that he received his word from the Lord. God was calling Abram to leave everything that had provided him social and economic stability and go to some place not only unfamiliar but also unknown. Hebrews 11:8 indicates Abraham went out not knowing whether he went. What God was promising was a new land for Abram. What God was doing was teaching Abram to trust him. Okay. Having promised Abram a land, God promised to make him into a great nation. This was possibly the most surprising of all the promises God made to him. Abram was 75 years old. Sarah, his wife, was unable to conceive and did not have a child. Genesis 11, verse 30. However, the scriptures teach that nothing is impossible for God, and it is God who opens and closes a woman's womb. Chapter 18, verse 14, chapter 20, verse 18, chapter 29, verse 31, chapter 30, verse 22, and 1 Samuel 1, 5 through 6, as well as Luke 1, verse 37. Apart from a miracle of God, this promise was not going to be fulfilled next. God promised to bless Abram in Genesis. God's blessing refers to God's I hate it when people use big words. God's bestowment of prosperity and fertility in life and the ability to achieve what God has promised. God then promised to make Abram's name a name of renown. Matthew pointed out what made Abram's name so renowned by being his gospel, or by beginning his gospel with the book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Matthew 1:1. Certainly, God blessed Abram for Abram's sake, but it was bigger than Abram. What's more, Abram, his sons and grandsons at times show themselves to be blessings to others in Genesis 30, verse 27 through 30. But this promise is ultimately fulfilled by God in Christ, the son of Abraham. Verse 3 shows how God's blessing in Abram would affect others. Those who align themselves with Abram and seek to bless him would be blessed by the Lord. Those who were against Abram and treated him with contempt would be cursed by God. It is important to remember whom the Lord has cursed so far in Genesis. God said to the serpent, "You are cursed," and promised that the seed of the woman would ultimately defeat him and rectify what he did there. When Cain murdered his brother, God told Cain, "You are cursed." In Genesis 9, verse 25, Noah declared that his son Canaan will be cursed because of how shameful he treated his father. Those who mistreat Abram would be cursed like the serpent, Cain and Canaan were cursed. They would become identified with the seed of the serpent who opposed the seed of the woman, while those who align themselves with Abram align themselves with the seed of the woman. Finally, God reiterated his purpose for blessing Abram. It was that through Abram shall all families of the earth be blessed. In verse 1 through 3, God revealed his promises to Abram, his pledge to Abram. God says, I will 4 times. And his purpose for Abram. The apostles in the New Testament understood that these things are ultimately fulfilled through the gospel to the Jew first and then the Gentile. Romans 1:16, chapter 2, verse 9 through 10, and Galatians 3:28. Okay, I'm going to stop there for this one. And I am going to go on to the Teacher's Commentary by Lawrence O. Richards. Okay. Which apparently has a little side note by First Baptist Church, Dallas, Texas. Okay. Now, there's a lot to this, So, honestly, as much as I would love to read it all, I would not love to read it all. Okay. But it is basically about 5 1/3 pages. So I will read a little bit of it just so you can get an understanding, and then I will give my synopsis. Okay, this is the overview. Abraham stands as the greatest figure to be found in the ancient world. 3 world religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, revere him as the father of their faiths. Archaeologists have explored the city of his origin, traced his journeys, probed the ruins of towns mentioned in Genesis, and have reconstructed a striking portrait of life 2,000 years before Christ that in detail after detail confirms the accuracy of the Old Testament account. But what makes Abraham important to the Bible study is not the reverence in which he is held. It is not even the belief the National Geographic once expressed that Abraham the patriarch conceived a great and simple idea, the idea of a single Almighty God, which apparently that came out in December of 1966, page 740. Abraham's importance is not even found in the fact that he is today a prime model of saving faith. No. The importance of Abraham in Genesis is that through Abram, God reveals his purpose and his goal for the universe. In promises to Abraham, God revealed that he had a plan. To Abram, we're given wonderful covenant promises that show us his history's direction and reassure us that our personal universe is a universe is a I don't even know how to say this word correctly. I'm just going to skip it. I'm just going to skip that part. Okay. Covenant. In Old Testament times, the Brit was at the foundation of social relationships. It might represent a treaty between nations or a business contract or a national constitution. In each case, it represented a binding agreement and expressed a firm commitment which was to be faithfully honored by all. Okay. Okay, let's go on to the statement of promise found in Genesis 12 is only a first faint outline of that divine purpose which gives shape to the Old Testament and to the history of the world. As we read on in the Bible, we realize that these first promises give the Jewish people their sense of identity. Then these first promises are developed. At critical times in the history of Israel, various dimensions of God's basic purpose are amplified and revealed. God made basic promises to Abraham, which are expanded as the Old Testament develops. It's helpful to look ahead briefly and to see some of the dimensions of the promise and the development of the purpose first expressed in Genesis 12. Okay. In verse 4, no, that's talking about chapter 15 now. Okay, let's see if I can find anything about the last part. Nope, he doesn't go into the thing with Pharaoh. Okay. Chapter 12. Here's what I see. God chose someone that he knew was going to follow through. He was going to make mistakes. He was going to do some stupid stuff along the way, but he was going to do as he's told. And in the process, because he knows that Abram, soon to be Abraham, is going to do what he's told, who is going to follow God, who is going to believe in this God, God promises him many children, right? One basic covenant. But then he also puts out there, hey, not only am I going to give you many children, I am also going to, give your people a place to live. Right? And that's what we're basically seeing. But then by the end of the chapter, we see what? We see Abraham forgetting God's promise and taking things into his own hands, right? When they end up in Egypt, right? God even said it. Those who bless you, I will bless. Those who curse you, I will curse. So, why did Abram, forget that? Why did Abraham allow this to happen? It's a good question. But it's one that's simply answered. We're human. Abraham, Sarah, they're all human. We're going to make mistakes because of two very important aspects. First and foremost, as human beings, we're flawed. Right? We are born sinners. Now, Adam and Eve were not made as sinners, but they were given a choice, and that choice landed them into a world where sin is now, alive and well. And it's something that no one can really, how do I put this? No one can really fight off. Not without God. So, So Abram, however you want to say it, starts out doing exactly what God called him to do. Accepts the covenant, right? And he starts tracking. He is doing what he is known for doing, which is being a nomad. So, then what? Well, while he's walking, his humanity kicks in, and he takes matters into his own hands. How many of you take matters into your own hands? We all do. There was one time in my life that I remember, and my parents can probably attest to this, if they remember, that I let God take control. My dad wanted to say something. My mom wanted to say something in this situation, and I'll tell you the story in a second. But I told them no, that God would handle it. And God did. God did handle it. So, I was in middle school, and this was in Virginia. I was known throughout the school as the nerd, but also the guy that believed in God. And there were two other guys that I knew. One of them, he was like really big, and I do mean big, but he wasn't stocky big. He was just big. And if you know anything about Samoans, you would know they're not small people. And he was the biggest guy in the school. And I was his teammate in one of my classes. Right? It was a computer class, when computers were finally becoming a thing. Yes, I know I'm dating myself. Anyways. We're sitting there, we're doing our thing, and this other kid, also another big kid, but this kid wasn't big as in big. He was big as in stocky. And he was just being downright idiotic. Just being a middle schooler, a preteen, doing stupid stuff. So my partner, the really big guy, tells him to be quiet. He says, "Shut up," but, And the other guy was like, "No, what did you just say to me?" Me, being the guy that I am, defended my partner, and I said, "I told you to shut up." He stood up, I stood up. We stared at each other. And eventually I got to a point where I was like, you know what, this is stupid. So I turned around to sit back down. When I looked away, he hit me right there. And I now have a tooth that is only half of a tooth. The rest of it is a filling. And it's on my upper. Right? It's the last tooth on my upper jaw. Well, we went to the dentist. We got all that situated, but thankfully, my dad was in the military at the time, so we didn't have to, do anything major. We just went to a military dentist and they got it taken care of, right? Thank goodness for the military. Well, my dad kept saying that he wanted to have a conversation with the school about this kid. And I told him no. I said, don't do it. I said, for one, if you do this, I am going to be, the laughing stock of the school. I said, for another, let's just let God handle this. God says that he's going to handle it. Let's let him handle it. And not too long after, about maybe another week or two, that same kid got into another fist fight and ended up making it to where another kid had to get stitches from his lip to his ear, and it was from a punch, no less. Not from a knife, not from anything sharp, from a punch. He cut his lip. And then that kid got expelled from the school completely, just like no more coming back, right? So God took care of things. Chapter 12 is a reminder that if we follow God, if we do as God has commanded us, he will bless us beyond all blessings. But if we stray, we won't get any blessings. We will get, kind of like a Gibbs slap if you've watched NCIS. You get a smack across the back of your head saying, dude, what up? We're all going to make mistakes. Abraham is a testament to that. Because he doesn't do it just once, he does it twice. Talking about Sarah being the sister. But in the process, stupid enough, because the king or the pharaoh or whatever realized it and then went, hey, why did you do this to me? Because they came back and showed respect, God honored that whole situation and made sure that Abraham got away with a lot. I mean, a lot of stuff. And Abraham eventually apologizes, Talks about, I'm sorry, man, I was afraid. There's that saying, let go and let God. It's a lot more difficult than you think to let go and let God. But when we do, look at how blessed your life is. We need to stop thinking about ourselves and what we can do for ourselves to bless ourselves and start thinking about what we can do for others or what we can do for God. God is our greatest gift. Jesus died for us. He didn't have to. We could all be going to hell at this point. But God, Jesus, sacrificed everything so that we would have a way in. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they had to have faith before Christ was even born. We get to see the truth now that Christ has died for us. So, Let's stop thinking about what we need to do for ourselves or our families and start asking ourselves, what do we need to do for God? What does God need us to do? And then watch those blessings pour in. There's that phrase about my cup runneth over in Psalms 23. Your cup doesn't run over unless you're asking God for help and you're following in God's line. If you walk in His footsteps, if you listen to what He has to say, the blessings will be pouring out so much that no matter what you do, you're pouring out blessings onto others. Abraham may have been someone of great importance. I do not agree with that one statement that he is the father of all religion for Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. I don't think he's the father of it. I think he's just the first one who saw God the way that we're supposed to see God, and followed God the way that we're supposed to follow God. He's the first example of what we need to do and how we need to be. That's what I see. That's just how I feel. Now, for those of you who watch this, who believe in God, who spend your days in the Word, remember, you are a blessing because of Christ. So stand up, walk firm, and do not falter from Christ. But when you do, and we all know we will, remember that getting on your knees and praying and asking God to bring you back, to guide you back, is the penance that is needed for your growth, for your mindset, for your heart. God blesses those who follow Him. All right, I've almost taken up a full hour. I told you it was going to be a while. You all have a blessed day. And don't have too much fun without me.